Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. This is Isaiah 42b, Yeshayahu, Parak Mem Beis, the second part, and this is Saul Weiner, your host for the podcast. In 42a, the first half of this chapter, we read about really the mission of the Jewish people on this world to bring the message of God to the other nations. We read that in the future times, in the coming times of the Mashiach, that the Jewish people would be a source of mishpat, a source of justice, going throughout the world, and that all the faraway nations will sing a new song to God, and all benefit from the special justice and righteousness. And we also ended with the verse 13, where God also mentioned that unfortunately in those future days, suffering and accounting will come to those that deserve it. So it will be both result in something good, something wonderful coming about in the world, but also it'll be a time of punishment and that type of justice to those that deserve it. Now, in the second half, we are going to focus a little more on Israel itself and why Israel suffered throughout the ages. As if you recall, in chapter 41 and 40, we studied how God said he's going to bring the entire world and all the nations, and the nation of Israel was kind of worried. Well, does this mean we lost our special place? God reassured them, don't worry, you're still special. But God still didn't explain, well then, if that's so, if we're still special, why did we as a Jewish people suffer so much during those years? And God is going to address that in this second half of chapter 42. It starts with verse 14 today. Hechasheti me'olam. I have been quiet for too long, God says through his prophet. Acharish esapok. I have been silent and I'm tired of being silent. I've held myself back, but I no longer want to hold myself back. In other words, for such a long time, I have kind of like a pregnancy, where the all of the noise and the drama happens at the end with the birth, with all the pain and the screaming, the suffering, the difficulty of the delivery, and ultimately, hopefully, the delivery of a baby, which would be similar to redemption. So therefore, God says, "Kayoleda efel," like a woman giving birth, I will scream, "Eshom v'eshaf yachad," I will gasp and pant in exhaustion. This metaphor has been used several times in Yeshayahu. Notably in chapter 37, verse 3, Parak Lamed Zayin, Pasuk Gimel, where Chizkiyahu referred to all of the work that he had done to try to save Yerushalayim, and he said, Ki va'u vanim ad mashper v'koach ayin l'leida. The children of Israel have come to the birthing stool but have not yet given birth. In other words, the ultimate redemption had not come. We also had this similarly back in chapter 21, verse 3, where we had the language as follows: Al ken mal'u masnai chal chala tzirim achazuni. My loins have been full of shaking, and I'm having labor pains, kitzirei yoleda, like the labor pains of a woman giving birth. This image, again now shows up in Yeshayahu, but this is, so to speak, God speaking and saying that this I want to give birth to redemption. The reason why he chooses the language of a woman giving birth is that ultimately this suffering will lead to something beautiful. In this case of a woman giving birth to a child, but in this case, ultimately it will give birth to the ultimate redemption of the entire world. However, it is involved with much screaming and pain and blood, etc. So that's why God chooses this metaphor, similar to the previous places. And we continue with verse 15. Achariv harim ugvaos. God has been using the metaphor of mountains and hills, referring to the arrogant and people, those that were, took advantage of others. And everything, all of the grass growing on those mountains, I will dry out. And I will make rivers. I'll dry them up and make them into islands. And I will dry up the marshes. God is using the metaphor also of nature being destroyed when he's referring to the destruction that will be meted out upon those nations that did not treat others in a just and a righteous way. And then what will I do? Now here I would like to call your attention back, all the way back to the beginning of Isaiah, chapter 6, where we had the call of Yeshayahu to prophecy, where God gave him his ultimate message. And I'm going to read that to you because this is the best way to understand the remainder of chapter 42. Again, let me point out that I'm deliberately pointing out in pretty much every podcast so far in the second half of Isaiah, the so-called second half, and connecting it back to things that were referenced before in order to demonstrate to you clearly with the accumulation of evidence that this is all a continuation of the same book. But if you look back at the call to prophecy, Isaiah said back then, God said then to the angels, who's going to go, who's going to be our messenger? Yeshayahu came and he volunteered, Hineni send me on a message. Vayomer, and God said, Lech v'amar tolam hazeh, say to this nation, Shim'u shamoa v'al tavinu, you shall hear my message, but you will not understand it. U'ra'u ra'o, you will see my words, v'al tedo, but you will not take it to heart, you will not get it. Hashmein le'val mazeh, v'aznov hachbeid, the heart of these people are fat, their ears are heavy, v'einov hasha, and they are turning away their eyes. Pen yireh be'einov, rather than see with their eyes, v'aznav yishman, rather than hear with their ears, lovavo yavin, and rather than understand with their hearts, v'shav arafalo, because if they did, then they could return to me and be healed. But rather, these people are not listening, they're not hearing, and so on. But Omar, and then Isaiah, I'm back and still in reading chapter 6, verse 11. I said, Ad Mosai Adonai, until when will this go on? And then God says, Ad asher im sha'u orimein yoshev, until destruction happens to the cities and so on. And the v'richak Adonai es adam, and people will be scattered around and so on. Right? V'rabbo hazuva b'kerav haaretz, and many will be abandoned in the land. V'od ba Assyria, but then a tenth will come. V'shava, and will return, and so on and so forth. Zera kodesh matzavta, the holy seed matzavta will be that which is the establishment of the Jewish people in the future. Now, Yeshayahu is talking about that future that God promised that one day will happen. So he first references, again, those people who refuse to listen, the blind ones, the deaf ones, right? Just like in the image in chapter 6 that we just read. So God goes on, now we're back to our chapter 42, verse 16. And I will take those blind people, those that sit and see. Remember, he said back then in chapter 6, the language is so interesting, right? Ura'u si v'al teida'u, and do not know. Here it says, halachti ivrim b'derech lo yada'u, those that are blind in the path that they did not know. In other words, why did they not know? Because even though they had eyes to see, they didn't see, so they're like blind people. The Jewish people had the eyes to see, but they didn't look, and they didn't get it. But I'm going to, in the future, take them down that path. B'netivot lo yadu adrichem, on paths that they do not know, I will lead them. Asim machshach lifnehem la'or, things that used to be dark in front of them, things that used to make darkness, I will make them light. Uma'akashim, and things that used to be stumbling blocks, they were crooked, will now be straight. Eila advarim, these are the things, asisim, I will do them. V'lo hazavtim, I will not forsake them. But again, they were blind. They didn't look. They didn't listen. They didn't pay attention. Nasogu achor yevoshe boshes. But those who habotrim b'apostle, those that had faith in idols, those that did not have faith in me, those that had faith in all kinds of ideologies and ideas that were not truthful, that were not just, that were not righteous, they will be turned around. They will not be led down that path. They will be embarrassed and ashamed because of their actions, behaviors, and what they believed in. Those that would say to things that were created by men that you are our gods. Hachershim, those that were deaf, again going back to what we read in Isaiah 6, Shema'u. Listen, now it's time to listen finally. V'evrim, and those of you that are blind, habitu l'ros, look so that you can see. Mi iver ki'im avdi, who is more blind than my servant Israel? They are the most blind of all because they had the message. They could have and should have seen. V'cheresh, who is more deaf kimal achi eshlach, than my servant that I have sent? God had sent the Jewish people to bring this message to the world. They are the most deaf of all because they didn't hear it themselves. Mi iver ki mishulam, who is more blind than he who is complete? This, according to Malbim, and I think this is I like this explanation the best, the mishulam, the one who is whole and complete, because he has access to the truth. They have the ability to know it all. But he is the most blind of all because he should be seeing, but he's not. V'iver, who is more blind ke'eved Adonai than the servant of God himself. The one who is God's servant, the one who has the instructions, the one who knows what he's supposed to do. But he's the most blind when he doesn't see it. Ra'os Rabos, Ra'isa Ra'os Rabos, you have seen all of the things that you should have seen. All of the miracles, all of the things that you did when I established you as a nation, you've seen them, v'lo tishmar, but you still aren't careful to keep your message. Pakoach aznayim, with your ears are open. In other words, you were told everything, you were taught the Torah, v'lo yishma, but you still did not listen. So therefore, why will this redemption take place, even though the people were not ready? Adonai chafetz l'ma'an tzidko. God desires that the people should come back because of his own righteousness. Yagdil Torah, he wants that his Torah, his teachings, should be great, and he will make them great, v'yadir, and he will magnify it and make it great and huge. V'hu am bazuz, but he, the servant, ended up becoming a nation that's bazuz, that's plundered, v'shasui, and trampled upon. Hafeach bachurim kulam, people that are trapped or stuck in holes, all of them, and they're imprisoned in jails and prisons. Hayulavaz, they became people that were abused, and no one saved them when they were in exile. Mishisa, they were crushed. Ein Omar Hashav, and no one was there to say, give back to them what you've taken away from them. Mi bochem ya'azin zos, who among you is actually listening to this message? Yakshivi Ishmael Achar, who is going to start listening and hear from now on and hear what it was, this message that I've been teaching. And God says, Mina Sanlim Shisa Yaakov, the servant of mine, Yaakov, Yisrael, and Yisrael of Ozazim, and who is the one who made it that the Jewish people should suffer so, that my servant Yaakov and Yisrael should suffer so? Halo Adonai, Zu Chatanulo, it is God. It is He, the one to whom we have sinned. V'lo avu b'drachav haloch. We did not go and turn on His path. That path that God said, the path that He's going to lead the blind on, we didn't take that ourselves. V'lo shama'u b'torah so. What was it that we didn't listen to? We did not listen to His Torah. That's why God made us suffer during that time. It's not those nations. Don't point your fingers at those nations and say, they made us suffer, we want to see them suffer too. Like we saw in the last parak before, God is saying, this came from me. Yes, I will lead you on the path, on the good path. I will take you home, unless you're one of those that's going to be embarrassed because you weren't faithful. But I will. But I want you to know that this was from me. Vayishpoch olav chema apo, and I poured upon him my servant, my anger, ve'ezuz milchama, the ezuz of war, the fury and anger of war, v'tilahatenu misaviv v'lo yada, and the fire scorched around them, v'lo yada, but he still did not know the message, despite having that Vativar bo v'lo yasim alev, and the fire burnt not just around them but among them, but they still didn't put it to heart. However, because Hashem chafetz l'man tzidko, because of His own righteousness, He wants to redeem the people. He will. But know that all of this suffering was from Him. Thank you so much for listening to Yeshayahu 42b. Looking forward to studying Isaiah 43 together.